Overwatch came out of beta in May of 2016, officially launching with 12 maps. In the nearly 2 years that have followed, 5 additional maps have been introduced, with number 6 just around the corner. By default, every single map in the game is eventually entered into the competitive map pool, and thus, no eyebrows are ever raised when the esports scene follows suit, including every map in rotation at all competitive events. This pertains to the Overwatch League, where all maps are included, though we do see rotations following every 5 weeks of competition. This is a novel idea, however we should be considering whether it is truly doing enough to balance the scales. We see it throughout all of FPS esports. Certain teams just perform better on certain maps. They may have had more time practicing one over the other, their playstyle may not just be refined for specific battlegrounds, whereas overarching strategies simply may not translate across the maps in play. To accommodate this, typically FPS esports allow for a picking and banning phase wherein the competing teams are required to choose from a predetermined list of maps. For instance, a team may want to ban a map that they haven't prepared for all too much, whilst picking a map that they're incredibly comfortable on. This bleeds into a lot of additional strategizing outside of the game, as coaches and analysts are forced to make vital decisions that drastically alter the outcome of a series before teams even spawn in. Now, given that we're nearing the final quarter of competition before playoffs in the Overwatch League, it's fascinating to take a look back and assess just how much of an impact the lack of a pick-ban system has had, and whether we need to be implementing one moving forward. To start out the discussion, let's begin with the extremities. NYXL and London Spitfire, two of the teams atop the overall rankings, are currently dominating the league on the following maps. NYXL are undefeated on Hanamura and Kings Row with 5 map wins on each. They're also the team with the highest win rate in the league on Ilios and Hollywood. London currently holds unblemished records on Horizon Lunar Colony with 7 wins and Watchpoint Gibraltar with 5 wins. They're also the team with the highest win rate in the league on Route 66, Numbani and Dorado. Conversely, on the other side of the coin, we have Boston Uprising failing to find even a singular map win on Hanamura. The LA Valiant have yet to secure a win on Horizon, the San Francisco Shock remain winless on Eichenwald, and the Houston Outlaws struggle more so on Route 66 than any other map in the game. Based off of those astounding statistics alone, it's already clear as day that the teams mentioned would benefit greatly from the ability to pick and ban certain maps. Now, let's play matchmaker for a moment and pretend that we're jumping into a series between NYXL and Florida Mayhem. Currently, neither team has a say in the map pool, and clearly that favors the team atop the rankings. However, what if picking and banning certain maps was an option here? Would it lead to a more entertaining series as teams could play towards their strengths whilst exploiting the weaknesses of their opponents? Would it give the second last team in the standings a more realistic chance of success against the number 1 team? It would certainly seem as though this is the case. Assuming that picking and banning is indeed in play, let's use escort maps as an example. Of the 4 available escort maps in the game, NYXL unsurprisingly holds positive win-loss records on all of them. However, their least successful map of this sort happens to be Dorado, with 4 wins and 3 losses, tied for their second most losses on any map in the game. Coincidentally, with 3 wins to their name on Dorado, it stands tied with Ilios for Florida's most successful map overall. Now obviously we can't take these numbers as gospel, as we are overlooking specific issues that occur game to game, as well as the level of competition each team came up against on these maps. But regardless, simply in the escort category alone, there are storylines here just waiting to be exposed. The lower ranked team heading into any given matchup should always have first say in the picks and bans in my opinion. Now if this were the case, Florida could pick Dorado as the escort map for their series with NYXL, giving them what is on paper the greatest chance at a map win against the best team in the league, and as a result, giving the audience in attendance and at home a reason to believe that it might not be an unimportant squash match from the jump. Those on the desk could be the ones to announce which maps are in play for the series, and that would lead to some exceptionally exciting analysis for a series that otherwise could just be considered a shutout 9 times out of 10. Moving into a different matchup, let's look at how picking and banning could be effective in a more evenly matched series between the Boston Uprising and Philadelphia Fusion, both currently floating around the upper half of the standings with 15 series wins apiece. Observing performance throughout all map types, it's evident that Assault is the strongest category for the Uprising, with 17 wins and only 8 losses in maps of this genre. On the opposite side, it stands as the Fusion's weakest map type. Despite having a positive win-loss ratio, it is currently their least favoured category, with only 1 map separating their tally of wins and losses. Of the Assault maps, Boston are most dominant across Egypt and Russia, with only a single loss coming on Temple of Anubis. Their weakest map of the sort, however, is undeniably Hanamura, without a single win to their name. Now, harkening back to the rule I mentioned previously, where we have the team lowest on the overall standings picking and banning first, Philadelphia could exploit this knowledge, selecting Hanamura as the assault map, which statistically speaking, should go in favour of the Fusion and their impressive 6-2 record on the map. Alternatively, if the Fusion opt for something else as their first pick or ban, then Boston could immediately step in and ban Hanamura from competition, as it is clearly their weakest map in the game. Those are just two quick examples that underscore the massive impact that a picking and banning phase could really have throughout the regular season, not to mention the excitement it would add when entering the playoffs. By the time Stage 4 is said and done, teams will have so much footage on their opponents and an abundance of data to collate in order to make the best possible decisions for their playoff matches. Coaches would be able to introduce new strategies with each fresh matchup, potentially even picking surprise maps to throw the opposition off their game. There are countless new scenarios that come into play with the introduction of a picking and banning system, but what are the potential downsides of implementing it immediately? Well, first and foremost, teams are already put through the ringer with the incredibly rigorous schedule of the Overwatch League regular season, and that's with a much smaller selection of maps in play. If every map was made readily available, coaches would have to drastically alter how their teams prepare for the coming weeks. No longer would it just be assessing the opposition's strengths and weaknesses from the maps that have been determined since the first day of Stage 1, but instead preparing for battle on a much broader scale, highlighting individual player tendencies as well as noting frequently repeated compositions or strategies. Something that quite simply isn't feasible with how many matches teams are competing in under the current format. To a certain degree, teams would have to more so focus on their own capabilities and depend upon their coordination trumping that of the opposition. Scrims would be majorly affected too, as no longer would all teams be looking to practice the same maps, for example. It just throws a wrench into the entire structure of the league, and as a whole, probably wouldn't make much sense at this point in time given how demanding the current schedule is. Personally, I do think that the addition of a picking and banning system is absolutely essential for the longevity of Overwatch as an esport, and I definitely think it's a component a lot of people want to see. It creates new narratives and gives us as spectators even more of a reason to tune in, and that's never a bad thing, right? However, in order to achieve a successful implementation, the entire structure of the league as we know it needs to be overhauled, or else the quality of games could suffer. A pick and ban system simply wouldn't work when all teams are required to compete twice a week. Perhaps we see it throughout the Season 1 playoffs, perhaps we don't see it until Season 2 or 3, but regardless, I do think it's something that many in the competitive scene have desired for quite some time, and should certainly be considered moving forward. So that's today's video all wrapped up, a shorter one than usual, but a controversial talking point that finally feels apt to discuss within the Overwatch League itself, since we now have a good basis of data to dissect. Do let me know your thoughts on the matter in the comments below. It's always fun continuing the discussion once the video goes live, but as always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.